All right, so this is a speaker meeting. Our speaker will share his experience, strength, and hope for approximately 45 minutes. We ask out of respect for our speaker to please remain seated until he has finished. It is my pleasure to introduce Bruce.
I'm Bruce Alcoholic. Just as a minor correction, next Saturday will be the last Saturday of the month. There'll be another one after that. My sobriety date is January 16th, 1987. I'll save you the headache of the math. If I can stay sober another 85 days or so, I got 35 years, which means absolutely nothing, okay? It just means I haven't gotten drunk and I haven't died in a long time, and that's the way this thing works. And the idea is if we can do that together, we can all live happily, okay? Now, I understand that I'm being broadcast. I didn't realize this was a hybrid meeting, which I think is terrific. We have a hybrid meeting, which if you care to attend, will be tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at Resurrection Catholic Church in Tempe. It's called the Sunday Night Big Book Step Study. And it has a really nice screen so we can see the Zoom people and they can see us, and you know, nice sound system and all those things. So feel free to come down and see if you'd like. It's on Southern and Evergreen in Tempe, the northeast corner. So I am very thankful to Mike for inviting me, and it's a great group. I really feel comfortable here with this mature crowd. We're not a bunch of kids, you know, we're veterans, but there are some that are retreads, and they're coming back, and we're happy to have them here, very happy. And Garrett, looks like you got your seat taken by somebody else, but she's cuter than you are, so it's all right. At any rate, what it's like, what happened, and what it's like now, okay? I started drinking just like everybody else, probably around 14, right around that age. I'd had a little nip off my dad's beer, you know, earlier than that, and maybe finished up a couple of cocktails that were brought in the kitchen from parties that my parents would have with their friends, or the other places. And really the original, I think we had about 3 cans of beer amongst us, or maybe we had a 6-pack and I got 1 1/3. You know, if there was 4 guys or whatever it was, and caught a little buzz, but didn't really have anything to do with it until I went down and celebrated the 4th of July with one of my dear friends down in Nogales. And Nogales is kind of my hometown. That's where my birth certificate was mailed to. The physical birthing took place in Tucson at the Tucson Medical Center, TMC. But my parents were living in Nogales, so that's where this thing was sent to. So anyway, it's my hometown. Go down to see an old friend, and we're going to go out and have some fun that night, the 4th of July, right? But prior to that, we went across the line, and of course, in Mexico in those days, this was a long time ago before many of you were born. So all you needed to do was be, you know, tall enough to put your quarter up on the bar, and they'd serve you a beer. Okay, and that was great. I just loved it. And I loved the taste of beer to begin with. And so that was one of the very first times that I was involved in drinking and caught a little buzz, and I said, this is for me. You know, this really fits. I enjoy it, and I think I want to do it again, and soon. Okay. Fast forward about, so let's say it was about 14, so maybe 3 years, 4 years tops. I still wasn't driving yet. But I go down with some other friends. We go back down to Nogales for like a 3-day weekend. We're staying with my friend and his family and whatnot. And we go out on sort of a hunting trip, midnight hunting trip, which you go out and try to kill furry beasts with whatever you have in your hands by way of firearms, okay? And basically the rules are anything that moves dies. Okay, that's the way that's done. If you can get them in the headlights and they'll freeze, then they're fair game, okay? So anyway, we go out and we've got some beer with us and whatnot, and we get, you know, pretty well toasted as we're out doing this hunting and whatnot. The one event that I recall during that hunt in particular is we were driving down the El Paso natural gas pipeline. There is a pipeline that runs from El Paso, Texas, over into Arizona that brings the natural gas here, okay? So we're on that pipeline maintenance road. And we get to this gate that is locked, and it's a good-sized gate. You know, it would, you can unlock it if you have the key and whatnot, and you can open it up and a whole vehicle can go through there, and we were in a pickup truck. So, but it was locked. But we had lots of firearms, okay? So that didn't stop us at all. So I said, oh, shoot, I'll do this. And so I had a 30-06 that had a scope on it. It wasn't mine. I had borrowed it from my friend. And so I scoped this thing in, and I've got it just right centered on the heart of that lock. And boom, I squeezed that trigger. And it's about 6 inches low because this thing scoped in for about 250 yards, right? But it's right in the center of the pipe that, you know, is a part of the gate. So this ain't gonna work. So I said, oh, give me a 12 gauge. So somebody handed me a shotgun. And so I do it the same thing, and I get it right in the sights, you know, and I squeeze it off, and boom, it blows up, and the whole gate blew down. It wasn't just the lock that got destroyed. The gate went down too. So we went right on through there and continued our hunting trip, right? And then we ended up going back and parking and whatnot, and we went across the line again, and this was 3 or 4 of us at this point, and we go into one of these bars. I'd forgotten Patique or Recreo or one of those that's right just barely across the line, and really get toasted over there, okay? So I get home, and I'm not a very experienced drinker, and I'm back at my buddy's house and whatnot, and I start getting sick. You know, I'm going to have this. I had not learned that magic trick of putting your foot on the floor when the room starts spinning, right? Any good alcoholic knows how that works. So, you know, I didn't know how to do that. So I was going to get sick, and I knew it. And I got into the bathroom at the far end of the hallway, and I threw my guts up. I mean, alcoholics don't throw up. They puke. Okay, that's what I was doing. I was puking, right? And it wasn't pretty. And I got rid of everything pretty much, right? So I'm stumbling my way back down the hall, and I go through a door or two, and I think I find the right room, and I turn back the blanket on the bed, and I climb into bed with his mother. She was not at all pleased, may I say. She just got panic stricken and took me back. You know, she walked me back to where I was supposed to be and put me down. And the next morning she came in and she shook her finger at me and said, Bruce, you keep drinking like that, you'll become a drunken sot. I had no idea what a sot was. I'd never heard the word in my life, okay? But I was terrified, there's no doubt about it, because I knew the word was going to get back to my parents, and they were not pleased at all. So those were my early drinking experiences. It expanded on and on. I ended up going to college in Southern California in the late 60s, which was a wonderful time to be over in that area. There was a lot of great music, bands like the Buffalo Springfield that nobody's ever heard of now. There was Cream that came to town, and they were a band that was, a lot of crazy people there, Ginger Baker and Eric Clapton and some other folk, and just some really great music. The Doors were actually live on stage. Got to see Morrison a couple of times. Got to see Jimi Hendrix twice. It was an amazing time, right? And there was other things, other substances over there that I became somewhat acquainted with. Some of them of quite high quality, and so it was an interesting time to be there. So I ended up back in Arizona and went into the construction business, and there's a whole other story around that. But what I want to talk about is not so much what happened to me and what it was like out there when I was there, but more about what it's like when we come in here. And some of the things we need to take with us as we walk down this pathway together of sobriety. The first one I want to talk about for just a minute, because it gets overlooked a lot in some of these kind of things where we're talking to a lot of different people about those things, and it is the book, okay? And I beat on the book. I'm a book banger or a book knocker or whatever you call them. But at any rate, I believe that book, titled Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the same title as this group, okay, this organization that we have, is the fundamental maintenance manual and repair manual and operation manual for the sober alcoholic, okay? If you read that thing and you understand it and take it to heart, then you can have a reasonably normal life, right? And it used to be, I hardly ever hear it anymore, but I remember when I came in back in a whole other century, it was a thing that we had kind of like the 90-day guarantee. Nobody gives guarantees in Alcoholics Anonymous anymore, and I think we should occasionally, okay? And there was the 90-day guarantee. The 90-day guarantee went something like this. If you go to 90 meetings in 90 days and do not see radical changes in your life, and you read the first 164 pages of that book, and come back after that 90 days and are not changed significantly in the way you live, we will cheerfully refund your misery. Great deal, huh? Get a complete refund, a full refund after 90 days. So that's the 90-day guarantee. The book basically, the front end of it is heavily loaded in the front end, all right? The doctor's opinion in particular is really important, okay? What it tells you basically is that you have, and I have, and people who want to recover have a fatal illness, and it's called alcoholism, and there is no cure. You will either die of it or you will die with it. You can die with it, you can still have it, but there's certain things you must do. But beware of how you get the effects of alcoholism. What happens is when you take beverage alcohol into your body, something happens, right? It's something different. It's an allergy. It's an allergic reaction. It's like somebody who can't take penicillin, gets a penicillin shot. Boom, they go into anaphylaxis, right? It's an allergy. Not necessarily every time you take a drink you're going to get an anaphylactic shock, but it starts to change things. An allergy occurs that sets up a phenomenon of craving, which means you're going to want another drink right away. It felt really good and you want another drink, okay? And it just continues that way. And that's the way we define an alcoholic. An allergy and a phenomenon of craving is what really is the definition of alcoholism, okay? So it goes on through there and it talks about how we're going to get well. And what it says, even that doctor's opinion, the very front of the book says that it takes an entire psychic change to recover, okay? To get to the other side where, not that you can drink again, that's not going to happen, okay? You can't do that. But you can live a normal life, understand what's around you, and be a normal person or semi-normal, right? But it takes those other things, and that psychic change is what they're talking about. And the other portion of the book, when you get past the foreword and the doctor's opinion, you've got about 103 pages, okay, that takes you through the steps and shows you how to get there, those 12 steps. And it takes you into working with others, which is a really important portion of the book. And then you've got about 48 pages that are basically to wives, to employers, and to the family afterwards, okay? I don't think it's in that order, but that's what it does. Those next 48 pages talk about those people you're going to be in close contact with, and if they read that book, what they can do to help, but it also helps the alcoholic to understand what they need to do to resurrect those relationships that they burned, okay? And then that final chapter called A Vision for You, which is really beautiful too. It's an amazing book because from people that got sober in 1935, which is like, what, 86 years ago? It's only 14 years, we're to 35 again. 86 years ago they started doing this thing. 4 years later they wrote that book. 82 years ago? Can that be true? And yet they wrote things in there like the 9-step promises that talk about what's going to happen to us, and they come true in our lives if we do those steps. How could they do that? Divine intervention. There is no question in my mind but the hand of God was involved in writing that book called Alcoholics Anonymous. I also believe fervently that the 12 and 12, a lot of people kind of dismiss the 12 and 12, but it is super important. It talks about the 12 steps and 12 traditions in a deeper and broader sense than they could do in that very first edition. So the book is where we get started. The book is where the relief will come to the disease, from the disease. We can pass that on. We can share it with each other. We can use it as a textbook to find out how to live. And the other thing that happens, really important, and is not mentioned in the book at all, strangely enough, is sponsorship. Now, I know people in this room who really think the sponsorship is important, and I do too. I think if you really want to do this and you want to do it right, get yourself a good sponsor. Males sponsor males, females sponsor females, and you learn because that person has been down that pathway before. The sponsor is typically someone who, the way my first sponsor described it to me, and I trusted him, okay? And what I trusted him was that I could stand in front of him, okay, and do my fifth step. I could be stripped naked of all of my bullshit, okay? And I could understand and trust that he would not hurt me. That was the very first time in my life that I was ever totally honest with anyone. And it was a wonderful experience. I can't say how much it improved my life to get all that crap off my back. It was like I was carrying a 90-pound sack of ready mix on my back, right? And I could just, boom, get rid of that and not have to carry it anymore. I started stepping lighter. He told me that I didn't necessarily have to build up resentments like I'd had before, that there were these other steps, like, the 10th step and 11th step, when we got to those, would take care of the maintenance so that I didn't have to develop those things any further. I was very, very fortunate to have some tremendous sponsorship. My first sponsor was named Joe Westerman. Joe's passed now. He and his wife Jane, both wonderful alcoholics, long-term sobriety. And his sponsor that I got to meet through being one of Joe's sponsees was a guy named Howard P. Okay, Howard P. has gone to the big meeting in the sky also. Okay, but Howard left us a legacy, fortunately, and it's a book, and it's called My Life on a Frozen Lake. And I will recommend that book by my sponsor, Howard P., to everyone in this room. Now, here's the beauty of it, okay? It's called My Life on a Frozen Lake, and you can have it for 99 cents. And I'm not kidding, okay? If you've got a Kindle or you want to get on Amazon and you Google the My Life on a Frozen Lake, it'll pop up there, and you can put it on an electronic device for 99 cents. You can have the book for $7, have your own copy, okay? It's still available. We're having a book study. I'll invite you to that too. Any Monday night you want to come down to Tempe to a place called the Pigeon Coop at 5:30 on Monday night. We're having a book study of My Life on a Frozen Lake. You would be more than welcome there, and you will really enjoy it because there's people there who are involved in producing that book. And they worked with Howard on doing some of the editing of that book and the publishing of it. At any rate, Howard's got this book, and it'll take you through those 12 steps, just like the big book will, the 12 and 12 will, and My Life on a Frozen Lake will take you through those 12 steps. And that is a great way to do them, okay? To do them out of the book, to do them out of the 12 and 12, and then do them by this volume that Howard's produced in this century. Okay, I got to get a sip. The other advantage of that book, and the other thing that I find really great in there, is in the very back of My Life on a Frozen Lake is a meditation guide. And it takes you through the first 3 steps very slowly and carefully. It takes about 3 pages. It's small type. But it's not something you can't do in about 10 minutes. And it's appendix number 2. And it is in that book. And what it does is it gives you a format for meditation. Meditation is something that a lot of people think, oh man, I just can't do it. It's just too hard. I just can't get myself centered enough. I can't keep quiet long enough to do it. Howard presents it so that it's really simple when you go through it. And just take your time. Don't rush it a little bit. And he talks about who is out there, who is this higher power that can control this thing that we can't. Because that is the purpose of the whole deal that we are here, is to find a power greater than ourselves that can solve the problem we can't solve. I can't solve my alcoholism, but I know that there is a power greater than myself who can do that if I simply seek it and ask him on a daily basis, and I do. He explains it, and he explains better than I possibly can. Howard's a great writer, okay, and he talks about what the spirit of the universe is, that is in control. And he talks about this being not just us, like in this room, or us just as in this association, or in this state, or in this nation, or on this planet. But he talks about if you really want to get a concept of who you're dealing with, okay, go out, and you can do that really easily in Prescott. Go out on a dark night when there's no moon out, okay, maybe a little ways away from the city, and look up in that sky. And what you're going to see is like 1 billion stars, okay? You can't count them. Just believe me, they're up there. They're even up there in the daytime. We just happen to see the blue sky. But they are there. And he built them. He's in charge of each one. He laid them out. And how far are they from us? That's the other part that Howard explains, because he was an engineer, right? He was involved in designing the Apache helicopter, so he knows something about some of these laws of physics and such. And so when we're looking out there and we're talking about light years, okay? A light year is how fast, how far light can travel in 1 year, all right? Light travels at 186,000 miles per second, right? Yeah, 186,000 miles per second, okay? And so a light year is how fast that light travels in an entire year, and that's a lot of seconds at 186,000 miles per second. Okay. And what we're looking at is from the Hubble scope, we can see that this universe stretches 100 billion light years. That's who we're talking to when we're on our knees thanking God and praying for relief from this disease. Is that universe, that God that created that and sustains that. And what we get is the benefit of his love coming through us. And he is the creator of all love and light and energy in the universe. And we're allowed to have a close relationship. I mean, it's just, I get chills thinking about it. I get goosebumps. It's amazing what's out there. And it's available. We just have to ask. And that's really all it took. I mean, I know for me, when I finally hit the bottom and I couldn't go any further, there wasn't anymore. Okay, I'll tell you how that happened in a minute. But basically what I realized was I was on my knees and I said, God, please help me. I don't want to be like this anymore. And sure enough, the next day I got up and I went to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and I haven't had to have a drink or drug since. And that, thanks you, is a miracle, okay? The way I got there, partially at least, is I had been going on a path. I drank for about 20 years pretty hard, okay, and had some other chemicals and whatnot for a long period of time, a couple decades, all right? I was in a situation in 1986, okay? And I had a relationship with a lady in Palm Desert, California, and we were just, madly in lust. I mean, it was wonderful. So she came over to my family's house for Thanksgiving, right, of 1986. And so she invited me over to her parents' house for duck à l'orange on Christmas Eve of 1986. Her dad was executive chef at one of the resorts, and he invited a dozen people or so for duck à l'orange on Christmas Eve. So I load up, and I had at the time a little red rocket sled. It was called a Dodge Daytona Turbo T, okay? It was a really fast little rocket sled that had way too much fiberglass and steel in a bad ratio, where it had a really fast engine and a really light body. And it had T-tops that were like Hearst T-tops, so you could see out and whatnot, windows above. and a 5-speed with a turbo that had a thing on it to show you how fast you're going, a tachometer deal, and a speedometer and all that kind of stuff. So at any rate, I'm headed up. I was coming off about a 3-day bender. I had been with my kids and whatnot. I had a little bit of Christmas with them and had to take them back up to where they were living, and came back. And so I was just on the end of about a 3-day bender on the 24th. So I loaded up everything into the back of this vehicle. And of course, when you car travel, you take everything you own, right? I mean, I had a VCR with me and a rifle and, a pistol and who knows what else? A cooler with wine in it to take to the party and all this kind of stuff with me. So I take off, and I'm driving from roughly 48th Street in McDowell across Phoenix to where I-10 began at that time. This was 1986. I-10 didn't run through Phoenix yet, okay? They still hadn't built the Deck Park Tunnel and all the rest. So the real freeway started at 27th Avenue in McDowell. I was driving across town with one eye open. Okay, now anybody who's a severe alcoholic knows what it means when you're driving with one eye open, and that means that you're just down to 2 lines instead of 4 to try to put the car in the middle of, right? So I'm going across here with one eye open and one eye closed, and so I get to the other side and things are going pretty good, and I keep cruising on down the road. At that time in 1986, we still had not recovered from the first Joe Biden, a guy named Jimmy Carter, okay? And we had 55 mile an hour, 55. I can't drive 55. Anybody know that song? Yeah. So anyway, we had to drive at 55. So I'm going down I-10, headed towards Palm Desert at about 65. Okay, I mean, I was pushing it just a little bit, not a lot. But, it's like I say, it's 55. So there's other people driving 55, and I'm kind of whizzing on by them. And then a guy goes by me, and he's probably doing about 75. He kind of went right past me. And he was driving a Trans Am. Okay, it was like that blue, Trans Am blue. Somebody's got that color on in here tonight, I'm sure. It's a really popular color. It's a really bright blue. At any rate, and so it's kind of like, well, I wonder if I could kind of maybe pass him, right? So I'm in my little red rocket sled, and I just kind of give it a little bit more, and sure enough, I'm up at 85, and there he is, and I just kind of give him the wave, right? And he just kind of smiles and nods his head back, and so I'm just taking off at about 85, and he comes by me at about 95. About this time, we are well out of the city of Phoenix. We're over almost, halfway to Blythe, okay? So at about 50 miles west of Phoenix, headed to L.A., so I'm doing about 95, and he comes by me at about 105, and I can tell he's really moving by that point. And I'm looking down, and I'm not even in the orange zone on this tax. I still got lots of pedal left. So I give it a little more, and I do about 110, and I'm past him, right? And he comes by me at about 115, right? And I'm just pressing a little bit more to go by him to see what it's going to take. And about that time appears in front of me 2 motorhomes, side by side, that are headed down the freeway on Christmas Eve of 1986, and they're doing 55 mile an hour. Okay, so that's kind of like, and we're driving by these other cars that are doing 55, like at 110. That's just like driving by a parked car at 55 miles an hour. So I'm not going to be able to get by these things, but I figure if I can just jig that wheel and go by them real close on the and then get right back up in the road. But it didn't quite work that way. Not exactly. I kind of just barely go by them, think I'm going to go by on the right, and a tire takes the dirt and turns that thing over. Okay, so now I'm going upside down, and I'm steering like crazy and giving the brakes everything I got, and it's doing absolutely nothing because there's nothing that's touching the ground but the roof of the car. And I'm sliding out through the desert. So I finally get the report back a few weeks later, and it says they estimated I left the road at 128 miles an hour and going upside down through the desert. And I crawled out the window because it was still upside down, right? I had to crawl out through the window, And I turned around and I looked at that vehicle and it was still smoking. Ugly stuff. And I go, this shit has got to stop. And that was what I call a moment of clarity. And it truly was. You know, I realized I wasn't going to be able to do that anymore. And I knew what the problem was. It was me. You know, it was me. It wasn't anybody else. It wasn't an ex-wife. It wasn't anything that anybody had done. This was all me. I had done it. So the next day, I made it there. Oh, that's a whole other story, right? I mean, an alcoholic who's got a few bucks and a couple of credit cards can do anything, right? So I eventually, you know, DPS comes and we have our conversation, and he, you know, but he's not going to take me in for a DUI on Christmas Eve. I mean, you know, he knows I can't drive that vehicle. I'm not driving anywhere that day. That's not going to be happening. So, you know, what's he got to lose? Besides that, he needs to be on the road trying to protect life and property, and he doesn't have time to mess with me. Okay, so he puts me on get the vehicle on the tow truck. They take me into the tow yard somewhere, and I don't even remember if the place is still there. And I get on the phone, and I convince a taxi cab in Blythe, California to drive across the border and come and get me. And he did. And so I've got all of my stuff coming out of the trunk, like I've said. I've got the rifle and the VCR and the, you know, the cooler of wine and all that kind of stuff, and try to box that stuff up. He drops me off at the bus station in Blythe, okay, which is closed. But there is going to be a bus coming through at about 7 o'clock. And so on Christmas Eve of 1986, I'm dumpster diving at the Carl's Jr. next door to the bus station, trying to get some boxes that just have French fries in them, put all my stuff in so I can stuff it on the bus and continue my trip. And, you know, I paid him in cash. I had, you know, $120 or whatever it was he wanted, and you know, I still had credit cards, so things were good. So I go on into Palm Desert, get there and whatnot, and the next day, my girlfriend's roommate says, you know, it's just amazing that you weren't killed and you walked away from that and you seem to be okay. You're not even limping. And I said, I know, man. It just blows me away. And she says, you know why that is? And I said, no. She says, he's not done with you yet. And I knew what she meant. I knew what she meant. It was like, nope, I can't do that anymore. But there's other things I get to do. One of those things I got to do is to come to Prescott tonight on October 23rd, 2021, and talk to a group of alcoholics about how we recover and how God's love makes that possible. I'm not a preacher. I just know there is a higher power. I know that God is there and he loves us and wants us to be successful and have a good life. And that's why he gave Bill the information in the book and gave us this program. Meditation is important. It's not that difficult. Part of Howard's process in that second appendix in his book is simply breathing in, knowing that the power of God is within you, and breathing out, knowing that the grace of God surrounds you. Okay? The power of God being in you means that God's spark is in each and every one of us. And that is a part of creation. And to take it right down to that, do you think the God spark is not real? Think of what it's like at that moment of conception where there's a million of these little swimmers trying to get to this one little egg, okay? You won. All right? You won. You won that race, okay? You're here. All the rest of them, they didn't get anything. The other, 999,000, whatever it was, besides that 1 in a million, didn't get nothing. But you're here, right? And that is that God spark. That is the way God planned it, okay? And it is perfection. It is everlasting. It doesn't change. The amazing part of that is that he also inspired Bill Wilson to write this book that gives us kind of a roadmap, right? The operation of the alcoholic. It's the instruction manual, and it works. I am really tickled to have been here tonight. It's been really, really good. I can tell you some more stories about sobriety and about what's going on. The last part I want to talk about, okay? And I do need to take one more sip. The last element in this whole deal that we're talking about is action. Action is the answer. Action is always the answer. There is no other answer. It is action, okay? It also tells us, 84 through 86, which is a great place to start reading if you're new, or trying to find out some of these things. And go back to the middle, kind of the center of the book there towards the end of that first 103 pages. 84 through 88, read it every day. Read it in the morning and read it at night, okay? It will give you some foundation, right? You're not going to be able to get away without doing the 9 steps in front of that. You still have to do those. But there's no reason you can't start doing some step 10 right now. It's kind of like while you're cleaning all the crap out of the house that you've loaded with crap, you can sweep off the porch, okay? You don't have to, you can start looking at doing those things of doing a 10th step, of taking an inventory on a daily basis, of thinking about what you're going to do in that 24 hours ahead and take that action. But at any rate, that's what really makes this thing vivid, alive, and real is action. Mike, getting the speakers, our fine chairperson, our secretary, these people. I mean, everybody here needs something to do in this program to have a part of it, to have a piece of it, okay? Whatever it is. If you're just sponsoring people, or you're showing up and trying to share, or whatever you're doing, personally, I have what I think is right for me, okay? A couple of things. One of them is that I like to do service work for confined alcoholics. And we call that H&I, or hospitals and institutions. Hospitals, of course, being the treatment centers that are pretty popular, and detoxes where people go when they, you know what I'm talking about. You know what a detox is. It's where you come down and get off of whatever you're on so that you can, walk and talk again and have normal bodily functions and whatnot. And that's those people that are in those hospitals. They may be psychiatric hospital. It may be just a detox. No telling what it might be. But that's hospitals, okay? And the institutions we're referring to are institutions typically where people are kept behind locked doors. And that would be jails and prisons. And there's a lot of good work that goes on in those. And believe me, I've done work in both of those, jails and prisons, and they want you there. They need you there. You are what they call not dope dealers anymore, hope dealers. You give those people hope. You give them the opportunity to find out about this program, and that they don't have to be that way anymore, just like I asked when I got on my knees and said, I don't want to be like this anymore. And you'll be amazed at how many people really want that. That once they are cleaned up, and once they decide that, maybe their second time, maybe their third time that they're down, okay, it will come to them that they need to change, and that this is the one and only deal that really, really works. I mean, we've got, number one, the misery back guarantee, right? 90-day guarantee. But also, we've got millions of people who've gotten sober and stayed out of jail. There's an amazing number of people who go back into prisons to take the message of a spiritual awakening, because that's what our 12th step is really all about. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. What is this message? This message is the message of a spiritual awakening, of finding that there is that higher power that can solve the problem you can't. So my pitch, if you have the possibility and the ability to do it, is to get into H&I work and find somebody to do there. It is just so amazing. to experience it. It's like watching people get well when you see them coming in the doors for the first time. Their skin is not what it should be. Their eyes are not what it should be. Their gait is not what it should be. Their just their whole comportment is not who they really are. They've been changed. They've been reduced to something less. But when you see those people starting to come out of it and start to take an interest in themselves, a true interest of, okay, maybe I can take one of those courses they're offering in here. Maybe I won't have to go out and deal sling dope anymore. Maybe I can actually have a job, do a trade, be an electrician or a plumber or a truck driver, or do something honest and legitimate and be proud of what I've done. That's important too. I mean, it really is important once you see it and once you can feel it, the effect that you can have on other people simply by trying to do what we say in our 12th step. Action is the answer. I really hope that you try it, and I really hope it works out for you just like it has me. It's a great satisfaction. And I shared with Garrett earlier that I do another little thing that I'm in the process of growing my beard for, because I do like to carry God's love to children. And so when it comes Christmas time every year, I'm Santa Bruce. And it's a joy. And last year in particular, when the kids were having to mask and they didn't get to see their friends and it was ugly, I'll tell you, I had 27 gigs last year, and those kids needed hugs. And they wanted hugs, and they got them. And they hung on, boy. And it's going to be the same this year. It's going to be a really exciting season. I can't wait to get started. I'm booking right now for doing that. And that is something you can do too. You know, that's there too. There are kids who are in foster care. There are kids who are in placements that are, necessary, and there are things that you can do for each and every one of them, right? Might be a little thing. Donate something off an angel tree. I'm sure there's angel trees around in various places where you take a card off there and you see what the age and sex and the name and what the wishes are for their Christmas stocking, and you can do something about that. It's not real expensive. It's something that you can do at the dollar store and make it real for them and let them feel that love of God too. It's a way to carry the message and do it a day at a time. So I again want to thank Mike for inviting me to speak. I may have run a little bit short, but I'm about out of wind. But I truly enjoyed being here tonight, and thank you. God bless you, and keep coming back because it works.